Hi there, this is a demo video for the computer graphics final presentation. First of all, the name of our project is the suicide polar bear, related to the climate change topic. As we know, due to climate change, the living environment for polar bear is quite serious now. The ice is melting and shrinking, so their living space has narrowed down. In my project, there are two main polar bears. One was suicide due to the shrinking of the living space. Therefore, he gives up and chooses suicide. Another polar bear crosses over 3 icebergs and finally finds a stable iceberg to live on. Also, there's plenty of daily life rubbish which is not created by nature in the North Pole, could be left over by the tourisms. So in my project, I got inspired by these and added some color can to represent the rubbish. I want to show that probably the waste we produce daily could cause environmental change. Here is a full demo for my project. We know the climate is changing, but some places have warmed up faster than the others. Climate change makes ice shrinking, and the living environment has changed dramatically for the animals, especially for the polar bears. Here is a scene that could be happening right now: the suicide polar bear. With the background music, Planetary Band's Warming World, composed by Daniel Crawford, with using data of 135 years of thermometer measurements. I'll break down the feature and introduce them one by one. Here is the required feature 1. So here is a crowd of animated polar bears. We have two main characters. The one is gonna suicide, and another one is the one who will cross 3 icebergs to find a stable iceberg. This polar bear is sitting on the iceberg as the iceberg stays on is stable, so it's pretty relaxed. Another one is rotating on the iceberg to show he's nervous about the fog and the climate change. Each polar bear has different actions like moving, sitting, and rotating. They could move with keyboard control like forward and backward, and able to turn left and right. So we could make the suicide happen earlier with the keyboard control. I will show it in the advanced feature later. So here is all the textures I use. Like I have 2 furs, one is for body and one is for leg. For the iceberg and sea, I have different textures for each of them. The color can I use a wrapping paper as I didn't find an exact image which could match the can of the color can. So for the Phong Illumination model, here you can see the highlight on the polar bears. It may not be that clear as it has applied bump mapping, so you can see the bump-like feature on the polar bears. But if we go to the icebergs and see, I have removed the fog to let it see clearly. We are able to see the specular on iceberg and sea clearly. I have two light sources. One is the sun, and another one is the moon. For the moon, the specular exponent is much lower than the sun, as what it's like in the real life. For each polar bear, they are taking different parameters and they have different material properties. And so does icebergs. You can say from this image, from this view, they all take different parameters to each other. As you can see previously, the normals are transformed correctly and shading is combined with ambient, diffuse, and specular. So you can see the hierarchical is between the body and the legs. The legs appear diagonally and rotate up and down regularly with different turn. Another two polar bears are not transforming, but they have different pose. This one is sitting on a stable iceberg, pretty chill and relaxing, looking up to the sky, and probably thinking why climate change has affected us that much. It's sitting on its back leg as in the realistic, and in a real life what a polar bear would sit like. Another one is only rotating the front legs, showing he's nervous about the environmental situation. So first, the animation is a moving of the polar bear as I just introduced earlier. The city is up and down, and you can see clearly compared with the icebergs on the side. Icebergs are floating and shrinking, same as the color can. They're on the same direction, floating to the top left direction. The iceberg on the left, where this polar bear stands on, is shrinking. So that made the polar bear wants to jump into the water to suicide due to the shrinking of the living space. It jumps into the water and disappears and never comes back again. When the iceberg is small enough, it will sink underneath the water. See, it's getting smaller and smaller. Yeah, just sinking into the water, along with the coal can on top of it. It first drop into the water, but it will float up again because of the water's buoyancy. And this polar bear is gonna walk through 3 icebergs to find a stable one to live on. And we can move the polar bear forward and backwards with cable control. Turning left and right as I introduced previously, we can make the polar bear suicide earlier with the control of that. And once the polar bear detects the edge of the iceberg, it will drop into the sea. All my models are made by myself. This polar bear is an image I found on the internet, and I use that as a reference image to draw my models. So I imported the reference image and create different mesh from that. Export them as DAE file. And I have applied the smooth and kindly rotate that to see how that looks, and it has changed the shape and it has changed the position, but it doesn't affect how we use that. And that's the iceberg. I created with a cube shape and cut the side to make it more irregular, to make it looks like the ice we can see in real life, as we won't have the perfect square or rectangular surface. The sun and the moon are just a sphere, and the coelacanth is a cylinder. So this is the smoke of fog. The further the distance, the heavier the fog. I choose 0.03 as my fog density, as it will show the fog and also the view more clear. I use same color as my background color, as it makes the fog looks more realistic. For bump mapping, you can see the polar bear has a bump feature on the body of the fur. On the iceberg, it looks like the surface undulating, but actually the model has smooth surface. Bump mapping takes only 2D image and calculating the illumination to fix the bump-like feature to make them look real. For my own feature idea, you might have heard it in the fourth demo session already. I have added on narration and the music at the beginning to introduce the topic of my project, the suicide polar bear. The polar bear that drops into the water has a water drop noise to make its animation more real, with experience of visual and audio. The music piece is composed with 135 years of thermometer measurements, echoing that the icebergs are shrinking because of temperature are getting higher and higher. This music composed by Daniel Crawford, and thanks for him to giving me permission to use it in my project. And thank you for listening.